we are living in very difficult times for the LGBT community, for marginalised people in general. And young people especially, they're aware of this. And I really wanted to be part of something that was going to help counter that, to actually tell the real story, that there are many, many LGBTQ plus people out there.
That's a beautiful way of summarising why this book is important, not just for young people and children who are LGBTQ plus. It's for every child to educate and to inspire.
I wanted young LGBT people to remember that actually that could be them, despite what certain people are saying online, despite what that narrative is.
Children need to be able to read books that matter to them and not be dictated to. My local library was my oasis, promoting libraries as a real hub within the community. That is so powerful. In this episode of My Words, My Book, we have Simon James Green. Simon James Green is a multi-award winning author of books for children and young adults. As one of the UK's leading writers of LGBTQ+ young adult fiction, he regularly visits schools throughout the country with his unique brand of Laugh Out Loud events, which have inclusion and diversity at their heart, along with positive LGBTQ+ messaging. Simon is passionate about reading for pleasure and helping young people of all ages realise the joy of books. Simon's latest book, A Year of Pride and Joy, LGBTQ+ voices share their life passions, illustrated by Ruth Burrows. This book continues to mirror his positive messages on the LGBTQ+ community. Simon, why did you become an author?
I'd always really loved creative writing at school. It's my favourite part of any English lesson if we got to write our own stories in class. I never thought it was going to be a career choice for me, a sensible career choice. I was quite academic at school. I ended up reading law at university. And I think while I was there, I realised that actually I didn't want to be a lawyer. I loved creative things. You know, I loved theatre and performing arts. I ended up working in theatre in the West End for quite a few years after I graduated, rather than, you know, the boring old law stuff. And I think it was during those years I kind of gradually gravitated towards writing again. And I realised that is what truly brought me joy, what I really love doing. And I do think it's important to do things in life that you really love and that you enjoy. So I thought I'd give it a go. And it took, I'm not going to lie, it took a few years to make it happen, but it did eventually. And that's how it happened. That's what I wanted to do, something that I really loved doing. And for me, it was always creating stories, creating characters, creating these fictional worlds. That's what I really loved.
Fantastic. And do you think that came from working in the theatre? Did you work in any famous shows, Simon, you want to share?
Yeah, I did. I worked, I spent a long time working on the Rocky Horror Show, about 2 years on that in the West End and on tour. I was involved in a production of West Side Story, Blues Brothers. I did some Shakespeare at the Open Air Theatre, Regent's Park. Loads of stuff. I think probably my love for stories came before that, if I'm honest. I think I was read to a lot as a child by my mum and my grandma, for example, and they both really encouraged me to start writing back when I was, I don't know, 7 or 8, something like that. And I think that's where I found my love of it, actually, and of telling stories way back then. And also getting involved in school productions, of course, and being involved in that creative side of life as a kid really had a big impact on me. So it's really something I've enjoyed for a long time.
Fantastic. And I think that's quite interesting because many authors like myself never left school, university, and went straight into writing children's books. So, what were the challenges that you had from that transition from working in the theatre to then writing children's books? How did you get into it? What did you have to do? Did you use your law degree in terms of the research and finding out, what is it I have to do to become a children's author?
It's a hard one, because the first thing you have to get your head around if you're going to do something like that is the fact that it's such an insecure career choice, right? You don't know if it's going to work out. You don't know if anyone's going to buy your book. And even if they do, you don't know if they're going to buy the second one or the third one. So you're not really sure what your next payday is going to be. And I think one of the big things for me was being able to deal with that level of being completely at sea, of not knowing at all what was going to happen, if it was going to work out, or whether I was completely wasting my time. And when people ask me, how do you have any advice, about being an author? One of the things I tell them is that you have to find some kind of way of really believing in yourself and your voice and the stories you want to tell and their value, because you're often the only person who will. You will hear the word no an awful lot when you're out there pitching your stuff. And even after you've published it, if you're lucky enough to get it published, you will still have people who hate what you've done. You have to find a way of somehow kind of carrying on through that and not letting it bother you too much. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, is finding that strength to carry on, even when it feels like everything's completely against you, which it so often does. So that was a really big thing for me, was getting my head into that sort of space where I was able to do it. And that never leaves you. I don't know if you found that as well, but I mean, I constantly am plagued with self-doubt, and thinking, oh, do you know what? Let's just throw the towel in, forget the whole thing. Let's just do something more sensible and with a regular paycheck, and not people telling you all the time that they don't like it. That would be much easier mentally. So there was that. And then I think it's finding your way into the industry, right, into the business. And yeah, I'd worked in theatre. I did this law degree. I didn't really know, if I'm honest, when I started writing, how to go about it, what to do. I was vaguely aware of resources like the Writer's Handbook that had lists of agents in them you were meant to write to and send some stuff, send your 3 chapters, see if they like it. They might get in touch if they want to read more. It all seemed very vague, very scary, very uncertain what people were looking for, what they would kind of vibe with and gel with, and what they thought could sell. It was really hard. And when I was doing it, actually, I wasn't really particularly online very much. So I think these days, perhaps, to some extent, you can find publishers, editors, agents on social media. Very often they will publish what they're, put on their website what they're looking for, perhaps in a new manuscript or a new author they might be looking to take on. So I mean, to an extent, you can find stuff a little bit easier these days. But it's hard. It's a guessing game, and I think it probably still is a lot, actually.
I believe so as well, Simon. I think you're absolutely correct. And I think there's so many keen themes in terms of what you've just shared, that you are going to get a lot of no's.
Yeah.
And I always say not to take it personally, because it could be for that particular publisher, they may have a similar book,
Right.
or it could be that financially they don't have the capacity for your particular book. But one of the things I always say is, if you believe in your book, and you mentioned that self-belief, which is very important, you have to keep on going, because your book, whether or not, because I work in the children's TV world as well, your book, children's TV idea, will end up where it needs to be. And there are some books that you will get a yes straight away,
Yeah.
as you know,
Yeah.
and there are some other books that you can go 2, 3, or even more door knocking to other publishers,
100%.
and you just have to think, yes, you feel flat at first. You think, oh, I want you to love my book.
Yeah, of
I've
course you
spent ages
do.
researching, writing this book.
Exactly. It's a whole chunk of your life. And
That's
you're
right.
absolutely right. And it's timing. It's getting in front of the right person at exactly the right time. They happen, like you say, to have that spot on their slate, which they're looking for something just like yours, and your manuscript happens to go across their desk, ping into their email box at exactly that moment they're looking for it. There's so much chance involved in that. It almost feels unfair, right? It's really difficult because you have no control over it. And I think understanding, particularly in publishing, but also, yes, in television, in film, in any of the creative industries, that there is that big element of you don't have control over a lot of the process, over a lot of the decision making, which is just out of your hands. And I think you have to find a way of just dealing with that and just letting it go.
Exactly, absolutely. And I think for a lot of children and young people who have some fantastic ideas for stories is to hold on to those books,
Yeah.
and they can still pitch that to a publisher even as a young person, obviously with their support of their, parent,
Mm.
school, etc. And I think it is important because I've been into schools like yourself and I've read stories written by children. I think, wow, this is outstanding. It should
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
book, right?
100%. They are same. I've seen so many brilliant story ideas that young people have shown me and shared with me. And what I always say to them is, okay, it might be that actually this isn't quite the right moment for it, but actually nothing is ever wasted. And yes, it might be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line when it's time to revisit it again. And I think that's a very important thing to remember. No work creatively is ever a waste.
Absolutely. And it's very subjective, isn't it?
So
Because
subjective.
somebody might like your work,
Yeah.
love it, and then somebody else may think, no, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And the point you made there, Simon, is that I have got storybook ideas that I've written 6 years ago, and sometimes I look back on it
Yeah.
and then I edit it slightly and I think,
Yeah.
oh, maybe it's the time now for me to share that with a publisher.
Yeah, you can take elements from it. A character might come from an old story and put into a new one. Some of the themes, there's so much stuff you can take out and repurpose for sure.
Absolutely.
So I think that's always a really important thing to remember, and to remember that's a very positive aspect of anything that you create. It's always going to be there. It's always ready to use when the time is right.
Indeed, indeed, totally. Which leads on to, as a child, what was your favourite book?
The book that I absolutely fell in love with was The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, aged 13 and three quarters, by the legend that is Sue Townsend. And I read that when I was about 13 and three quarters, actually, and it had a huge impact on me. I mean, look, it's a story just about a regular teenage boy growing up in Leicester, his dysfunctional family life. There are no superheroes in it, no superpowers, anything like that. There's nothing supernatural or anything. It's a very regular contemporary 80s story. And I absolutely loved it. It was the first time I saw a character in a book who felt exactly like me, an awkward teenage boy who was forever sort of getting everything slightly wrong, and humiliating himself, embarrassing himself in lots of ways. And that was a really powerful thing. And I think it reminded me later, actually, how important it is for everyone to see themselves, their lives, their experiences in the pages of a book, and how it can make you feel so much less alone when you realize there are other people like you going through exactly the same stuff in pretty much the same way. And it was great for that. I loved it for that. I also loved it because it was a very funny book. And it really inspired me when I started writing my books years later. I thought I would love to create something in a similar kind of space to those Adrian Mole books, something funny, something contemporary, something that people would really relate to and resonate with, particularly for those kind of awkward kids at school, like I was, who need to feel like it's okay to be you. And you don't have to pretend to be some, alpha male, muscly, protein shake drinking guy. It's okay to be this kind of skinny, scrawny kid who's embarrassed and sits in the back of the class.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, that in terms of Adrian Mole, I remember the television series as
So
well.
good. So good.
That came out as well of the book, and it is a classic, that book. And I think in terms of what you was just sharing there, Simon, that it's important for children to read a book and think, oh, this is really relatable.
Yeah.
I can see myself in this book. And isn't that the power of books, that a child who maybe have low self-esteem, thinking I'm the only child in the world that has got, that
Yeah.
feels this
Feels
way,
this way.
that has this family. My family's like this, I've got autism.
Yeah.
I'm neurodivergent,
Yeah.
etc., and be able to read a character that technically is mirroring
Right.
themselves and their family, that is so powerful.
So powerful. And when, as an industry, we're having a lot of discussions at the moment about why young people aren't reading, why do they stop reading, why do they fall out of love with books? One of the answers to that is, it's so important to them to find books that actually speak to them and that they relate to, because it's about what they're going through, what they're experiencing, the things they are talking about with their friends and peers, the things they are thinking about. It's really important we have books that do that, and that we really champion and support them, and accept also actually that sometimes those books are books that some adults would rather they didn't read, actually, because they're a little bit too real. Um, and I think it's very important that we support them and look after those books for sure. For that reason, I think that's one of the things that would really help that kind of reading for pleasure crisis that we're in.
I think you're absolutely correct, and I feel that children need to be able to read books that matter to them
Yeah.
and not be dictated to. Because obviously, because schools follow the national curriculum, there's certain books that need to be shared and read in school. And this comes into what I always say, the power of libraries,
Yes.
because we have, libraries closing down left, right, and centre. And as a working class child, my local library was my oasis.
Of course.
And I visit there, still now on a regular basis to share stories with children. So if we're able to share with children and young people, not necessarily, the school may not have the book that you want to read, but your local library, and that is so powerful within that. So I think in terms of promoting libraries as a real hub within the community that any child can go to, and I would say if there's a book that you want to read and your local library doesn't have that book, ask the
Yeah,
librarian.
they'll get it for you.
They'll get it for you.
They're amazing places.
The world is your oyster
Yeah.
within, a library.
So that's what you need, that breadth of choice. Because let's be honest, if I'm picking up a book to read for pleasure because I'm going on holiday, I will pick something that resonates with me, that appeals to me, that is about a topic I want to read about, with characters that I relate to, most likely in some way. And it feels like it's not rocket science, this idea of choice and the importance of championing that whole kind of diverse range of different books, different characters, different storylines, different experiences, not all the same. So important.
Exactly. And that brings me nicely on in terms of diverse books, different books. This, beautiful, joyful
Oh,
book.
thank
It's
you.
absolutely, it's scrumptious. A year of pride and joy. 52 LGBTQ plus voices share their life passions, and illustrated by Ruth Burrows.
Ruth Burrows, who's done a astounding, astonishing, brilliant job with the illustrations, because it's just absolutely gorgeous, full colour throughout.
Absolutely, and it's just it's amazing. So in terms of a quick summary to share, how would you package this book?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it is relatively simple. It is 52 LGBT people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, different countries, different jobs, different careers, different things they do, talking about something that brings them joy in roughly about 150 words or so. And we've packaged it up so it's kind of one for every week of the year, and tried to connect those elements of joy to something significant in the diary in the year, whether it's, connected with, for example, pantomimes at Christmas, or certain weeks of the year that are supposed to champion outdoor life or wildlife or something like that. So we've connected it all like that, and then along with each of these Pieces of Joy, there's another sort of non-fiction section, just kind of giving the readers some idea about how they could get involved in it themselves. So, for example, we've got a brilliant piece from Miriam Margulies about the joy of food, which is written about how much she loves eating. Terrific. And alongside that, we've done her chicken soup recipe, so that if you're feeling a bit peckish after having read her entry, you can go off and make her delicious chicken soup. And give that a try. So it's really nice, sort of book you can kind of dip into if you want at any time. You know, if you want to read something on a particular, you know, connected to a particular festival or part of the year, dip into it then. Or if you just fancy reading it cover to cover, it works however you want to do it, basically.
And I think it's amazing. We've also too got Tom Daly with knitting.
Yes.
There's a florist in here.
Yeah.
And as you so rightly say, it's a book that you can dip in and dip out of. Maybe have a go at knitting if you've never knitted before. The soup.
Yeah.
As I said, there's a florist in there.
Yeah, we've got a magician. You can try a magic trick. There's illustrators. You can have your go drawing your own kind of cartoon panels with Lewis Hancock's. Bird watching. We've got Will Young, the singer Will Young, talking about his joy of restoration and how to basically polish brass, which, I mean, I have to say, I did not expect Will to come up with. Who knew that he was so passionate? His hobby was kind of restoring old stuff that he'd found in kind of charity shops, right? And bring them back to life. Joy of theatre, joy of film, lots of creative stuff in there. And we've got a Eurostar train driver as well, talking about basically the joy of driving trains, and with accompanying stuff all about how the Channel Tunnel was built, you know, a sort of feat of engineering. Honestly, I was so pleased that we got such a wide range of different contributors from all walks of life. And yeah, like you say, there are some brilliant kind of A-list celebrities amongst them for sure. But also we really do have amazing people of all backgrounds, you know, scientists, educators, teachers, activists, politicians, theatre makers, filmmakers. They're all kind of represented, which I
Something
love.
for everybody.
Something for everybody.
There is something for everybody, because I contributed to another book by the same publisher, A Year of Black Joy.
Yeah.
And that book is obviously similar in terms of layout, the style, 52 weeks of the year.
Yeah.
And it is just such a beautiful book to have. And I would call it sort of like an evergreen book, because you can just take it out at any time of the year, as you so rightly said, to dip in and dip out of.
Yeah. Exactly, and you know, you could use it, for example, I think both those books use it in a school, you know, for school assemblies, for, you know, again connected to certain seasons or events throughout the year for sure, or as just a personal thing, have it on your coffee table, need a bit of joy, open it up.
Absolutely, we all need some joy, Simon.
Don't we just?
Another reason why I feel that this book is super important is the representation of LGBTQ plus community. And do you just want to expand on that a bit more? Why it is important for children to see positive representation of different communities and different cultures, and especially because this book is 52 voices from the LGBTQ plus community?
That was the main reason when Magic Cat, the publishers, first approached me with the idea for this book. That was the reason I wanted to get involved with it, because I was well aware that we are living in very difficult times for the LGBT community, for marginalized people in general. Let's be real, you know. But for LGBT people, so much negativity and hate online, on social media, certain politicians, you know, stoking culture war nonsense in order to kind of further their aims. And young people especially, they're aware of this. They hear it, they see it on the news, they know what's going on. They see that negativity for themselves online. And I really wanted to be part of something that was going to help counter that, to actually tell the real story, that there are many LGBTQ plus people out there living rich and varied lives, joyful lives, contributing an awful lot to their communities, to society, to the world in general. You know, we've got people in this book who are at the cutting edge of science, who are making amazing discoveries that could potentially change the world. We've got people who are just at the top of their game in their various fields. And I really wanted, first of all, I wanted young LGBT people to remember that actually that could be them. That actually, despite what certain people are saying online, despite what that narrative is, that actually they can achieve great things. And not only that, they can be happy as well. And that was really important. But also in a wider sense, I think it's really important that all young people get to read this book and get to see that actually there are people who may not be exactly like them, but there are people out there, LGBT people, who are doing great things. And it's a wonderful thing to read a book and put yourself in someone else's shoes altogether, you know, to read about someone who is nothing like you, perhaps, understand maybe a little bit about the struggles they've been through, the obstacles they've faced, but ultimately seeing that actually their hopes and their dreams and what they're doing are actually pretty much aligned with yours at the end of the day. And that actually we are stronger if we all stand together and work together and achieve great things together. And that's what I hope anybody picking up this book would actually find ultimately, you know, that it's inspirational in that way, I think. And you can see that there are brilliant people out there doing brilliant things from all different countries, all backgrounds, all cultures. And that is an option. We don't have to live in fear. We don't have to hate. We can actually unite and work together and fight for that better world, you know? And I guess that's what I really, that's ultimately why I wanted to get involved with this book and make this happen. That was the big message I wanted to really give. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think that's a beautiful way of summarizing why this book is important, not just for young people and children who are LGBTQ plus. It's for every child
Yeah.
to educate and to inspire as well, because it's an inspirational book. It's educational and it's inspirational equally as well. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes. So your favorite page in this, I know there's 52 to choose.
So difficult.
It's not, so the other 51, you're all equal. We're all equal. You're all equal in pride and joy.
Yes, absolutely right.
But you do have a favorite page.
I do. It was difficult to choose it, but we've got a brilliant page from a detective. Now, he might be a private detective. He could be in the police. I don't know, because it's actually an anonymous
Intrigued, Simon.
entry.
Very
I know.
intrigued.
It's very intriguing. That's kind of why I chose it, because we've all of the other contributors. The illustrator Ruth has drawn their pictures. You know, so you know what they look like. But this guy, Thomas, his name is, just a silhouette, complete mystery. We don't know his identity. I love that, first of all. But secondly, one of the things I wanted in this book was to have loads of stuff in it that, as a kid, I really enjoyed. And I think when I was about 9 or 10, I'd been reading the Osborne book of setting up your own detective agency. Loved it. It was great. You know, it told you exactly how, you know, you need a little fingerprint kit and how to set up your bedroom for as a detective office, find cases, track criminals, you know, brilliant. And it was the sort of thing that I loved as a kid. So I wanted similar things in this book as well that I enjoyed and that I hoped kids today still would. So that's one of the reasons why I also picked that detective section, because as well as talking about his work as a detective, he does also give you some great tips about how you too can be a detective, you know, and what kit you need, how you set things up, how you look for clues, and that type of thing. So I think it's a really good example of someone who's really passionate about their work, which is a great source of joy, but also a really fun way to get involved with it yourself as well, and actually have a go if you're maybe bored on a rainy day or something, you know, something really practical you can get involved with and do. So yeah, definitely one of my favourites.
Favorite is the detective.
Yeah.
It's a great page. I had a sneaky look earlier. And I think that brings me on to where you was talking about the Osborne book as well as a child. And I love those types of books. I remember reading one, I think it was about 50 things, different art and craft things as a child, those types of books. And I think we had the conversation earlier, Simon, about the importance of non-fiction books as well as fiction books, because I always find as an author is that what sometimes takes centre stage are children's fiction books, and non-fiction books are equally as important.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, it can often, I agree with you actually. And it can often feel that certainly in terms of some of the big book awards, the focus is very much on the fiction titles, brilliant as they are. But yeah, non-fiction is really important. And actually, it kind of loops back to what we were saying earlier about this decline in reading for pleasure. And the fact is, a lot of young readers, they do prefer a non-fiction title for lots of reasons. I think there was lots of research into it, but I think especially certain boys, can really that can really resonate with them, a non-fiction book. And yeah, it's a great way of finding out about the world, of discovering new information that's not online, and that's a really great thing as well. Absolutely. So it would be really nice to see a little bit more, wider support for these non-fiction titles. I think they've got a lot to offer. Great way of discovering information, reliable way of discovering information, actually. I'm always telling people, it's so dangerous, isn't it, going online looking for the answer to something, because there's so much misinformation out there these days. Can you trust what you're reading on a website? Who's it come from? Who's got a vested interest? The thing you can be sure of about a book, especially a book from a mainstream publisher that has been chosen by professionals to be in a library or a school, is that you can be sure the information in there is going to be reliable and well presented and well researched and accurate and not harmful and all those things that are great, and that's why, goodness me, we should absolutely, like you were saying earlier, fight tooth and nail for libraries, for librarians, and for these books to get into the hands of the people who need them.
Indeed, indeed. And if you was asking yourself a question about this book, what would you ask yourself?
For me, with any LGBTQ plus title at the moment, I would always ask myself about the wider world we're currently living in, and the fact that so many LGBTQ plus books get pushback from people who honestly believe they have no place in the hands of anyone under the age of 18, shouldn't be in schools. It's something I've experienced myself in the past, pushback for my own YA novels, my LGBTQ plus YA novels. Everyone knows, I think, about the book bans in America. There are people over here in the UK who are very happily pushing a sort of similar idea. It makes me very sad, actually, because I think it's really important that we spoke earlier about how everyone needs to see themselves, their lives reflected in the pages of a book. That's not in doubt. It's a really powerful thing. But so important that everybody gets to read these books, regardless of what some people might think, actually, because regardless of someone's personal opinions about the LGBT community, they will spend their lives living and working alongside people who may well happen to be LGBTQ plus, whether they like it or not. Might be a neighbour, a colleague, a client at work, whoever it might be. What are you going to do? Live your whole life in hate and fear of those people? That's no way to live. That's not healthy. It's really important that we champion these titles and that we're not afraid to promote them to young people, so they see that they're out there, and stand up against those individuals who would rather silence us, the books, pretend we don't exist because it's somehow inconvenient to them or they don't like it in some way. The world is a diverse place, and that is never going to change. It's just a fact and a reality. So people need to get over that fact and embrace it.
Indeed. You're absolutely correct, Simon. And I think which leads on to the next question in terms of the teaching points, takeaways for children from reading this book. What do you want to resonate with children, or for them as a takeaway learning point?
I think one of the things that I've found, certainly with all the books I've published myself so far with my fiction titles, is actually it can be at its most powerful when the LGBTQ plus element is almost incidental to to what the book is actually about, you know. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of my fiction titles are very funny stories. They're very humorous, often quite kind of, in some cases, slapstick comedy, you know. But the focus is usually very much on that, on the mayhem, rather than on perhaps a big, I don't know, coming out narrative or something like that. I think the power of A Year of Pride and Joy is that it's just really interesting fundamentally. There are so many different perspectives, different people in there talking about their lives, their careers, their hobbies. Very few of them actually mention or talk about being LGBT specifically. It just happens that they are. And I think that's a really important thing, because you can look through this book and you'll actually barely read anything about being gay or bi or anything like that, actually. There's a few mentions, of course. For some people, it's an important part of what they're talking about. But actually, the main thrust of this book is simply, joyful things that people are doing and engaging with. And I think that's the power of it, you know, because you then almost find out later that actually they just so happen to be LGBT.
Absolutely. And joyfulness is a great point to finish off on. So, Simon, this has been an excellent interview, and thank you for sharing. It's been amazing. And so you can read A Year of Pride and Joy.
Yeah.
And don't forget to use your library. I say this in every interview. If you can, if there is a library near you.
Definitely.
And for me, as I always say when I finish off, it's about keep reading. Keep reading and reading and reading. And thank you, Simon, for sharing.
Thanks, Laura. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. This podcast was woven in partnership with our friends at Tapestry, the childhood education platform. They have kindly devised the educational resources for each podcast interview. Tapestry helps you celebrate children's learning, improve communication with families, and streamline your admin with powerful booking, invoicing, and management tools, giving you more time for what matters, the children and you. Visit tapestry.info to find out more. This podcast series was recorded at the Quick Brown Fox Video Production Studios in Wandsworth Town, London, with top-notch equipment and a knowledgeable team who are always happy to help. Recording our podcast has been a breeze.